that being said, let's bring him in. Mr. Andy McGrillen. Do you just like Andy? I'm not going to call you your last name.
I like Sir. No, Andy's fine. And I've got to say, genuinely, I think that's the best pronunciation of my surname I've ever heard in my life. I can't say my own surname properly because it's too hard with a Scottish accent, and I'm not even joking.
Oh my God. Just to interject a little bit, when you had Earl on the show, I was I drive through Boston for work. I drive all around. So I listen to you a lot. And you trying to say Earl had me, I almost crashed in the tunnel. I was laughing so hard.
I think I said it about 9 different ways. Earl.
Yeah.
Errol.
He was but can you tell our audience and anyone who's watching who you are and how you got into the subject of podcasting, specifically on the UFO topic?
No, I'm happy to do that. It reminds me as well because I forget. So my name's Andy, and Ty, do you want to say my surname again because you said it really nicely?
McGrillen.
Yeah, so Andy McGrillen, and that's the other way I pronounce it. God, how did I start in the UFO topic? I've always had an interest in UFOs. Growing up, I loved as I've said before, like mysteries around the world. Used to love reading about the pyramids on oh God, what was the really old Encyclopedia Britannica stuff? You would get CD-ROMs, and I love things like Loch Ness, Bigfoot, UFOs, and you could just type it in a quick search and bang, there it was. Growing up, had kind of 2 big kind of sightings. The first one is like the kind of logo for the podcast. This little patch I've got here has got this kind of thing. Sorry if people see this horrible thing. I burned my hand yesterday, so it's like a plaster. That's not my skin hanging off. Apologies, right? People are going to be like, "Oh my God, he's a lizard. He's like peeling on camera.
He's a shapeshifter."
Yeah, that's right.
It's a burn, or a burn. As
Suspicions confirmed.
Oh my God, there
alien.
it
is. Sorry. So growing up, I had a couple of sightings, and that first one, it was a kind of cold winter night, 9 p.m. UK. I think it was around about November. About 95, 96, maybe 97. It was that long ago, I don't remember exactly. And I was leaving, like, you've got the Boys Brigade, which is a little bit like the Scouts in the UK type of deal. And I was leaving the church that was held in, not a religious thing at all, but just where they held it. And it was a really built up suburban area, lots of houses, shops, cars going up and down the road. It wasn't in the middle of nowhere. Very, very built up area, no big fields or anything, literally millions of people in this kind of smaller space. And looking along this road, the half a mile at most, there was what looked like a Ferris wheel, like a carnival you would see on its side at a bit of an angle and spinning ridiculously fast, like a washing machine would. Couldn't make out an exact shape or anything, but you could just see the lights spinning round. Wasn't high up in the sky, low enough that you couldn't see the bottom of it for the houses and the trees. And I just remember there was me, my sister, my mum, my friend, and his mum. And we just stopped, looked along at this thing as we crossed the road. Other people would have been about. There were other cars and, like I say, shops and houses. And we just kind of looked at it, interested, and, what is that? Oh, I don't know, really interesting. It was the mid-90s, no camera phones, no one's walking about with a Panasonic massive handheld camera around their neck, waiting to take pictures. Huge, let me get the camcorder out. It would have been on your shoulder, one of those efforts. And yeah, we just looked at it, watched it, and interesting, went home.
Now, were you aware of anything, like, because you said in the 90s, were you aware of any other, like say the Phoenix Lights?
God,
or
no.
were you,
nah.
You had no idea about something like that?
Nah, I mean, mid-90s, you're talking VHS. At that time, I didn't have the internet. There was no AOL 7.0 that would come along, no dial-up. So for me, any interest in UFOs, it was literally library books and the odd video that you could rent from the library about UFOs. Yeah. And it was all the same video, just made in a different way,
Yes.
So there was nothing like I really, and I was only about 10. I'm 37 in like 2 weeks. So I was like, I was like, God, 10 years old or something, 11 years old at the time. So I wasn't old enough to be really well versed or a member of any kind of like newsletters or magazines, that kind of stuff. So it was all the basic things you know about. Was it a Roswell? And I used to watch the Roswell movie that was available back in the day. So that was a really limited UFO knowledge as such. Yeah.
Wow.
So you see it. So you and your family see it,
Hmm.
and there's not really a discussion too much about it. You just it's hey, look at that, and then kind of keep going.
Yeah.
Right.
My mum has no interest in the UFOs. Like if I mention UFOs to her now, even she'll be like, "Well, aliens, nonsense. There's nothing coming here from other planets, all that kind of stuff." She saw that, and if I ask her about it, she remembers, and I'll say to her, "Do you remember that object, and what was it?" And she'll be like, "Yeah, I remember it, but I don't know." That's it. That's just like, and it's not like she's scared to talk about it. She's just like,
Right.
"Don't know what it was." That was it. Kind of end a
Mm.
conversation.
Right.
It still blows my mind that some people can have an experience like that where they see something they truly can't explain, don't know how it's up flying the way it is, not shaped like an airplane or anything conventional, and they can just okay.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, and do you know what? If it was like a Ferris wheel, it was broken, and all the people, all the, all the people on it were dead because
That's funny.
yeah, the speed it was going round would have killed them all, and I'm
Oh my
sure I would
God.
have heard about that in the news. I would have probably seen the bodies landing next to me at the distance it was
Right.
from the force that would have been thrown off this thing. So yeah, it definitely wasn't a carnival. We would have known about it. It was literally next to a kind of a football soccer field. Not like a big football teams one. It was like a local one. You could rent the space next to a sports center.
Mhm.
So you would have known if that kind of thing was happening. And it
Yeah.
was just this object was there at a weird angle, going ridiculously fast. And I always regret because where I lived, I was literally a couple of minutes from my house. I lived in a high rise flat, we would call them in Glasgow,
Yes,
Scotland.
an
Like
apartment.
yeah, apartment block. But do you get like really high apartment blocks in the US?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
20
But those are all
floors.
in that's in like major cities though.
Yeah, well, we have them in Glasgow, and we fill them with the poor. So I lived in one of those, and it was like cheap, affordable housing type scenario. And I was like, really high up on a hill, so I had a really lovely view of the city. It's probably the best thing about living in a
Exactly. Yeah.
crap kind of living accommodation. You made the most of it.
What's funny is I think they call them the ghetto here.
Yeah, I mean,
Because all those high rise apartments are typically, like the cheap affordable housing are in inner city, like in like you said, it's affordable housing. So
yeah, every floor was different. It was like it was going through like Super Mario World, where each level got progressively darker. It was like if different floors like had that do.
Oh
And
my God.
you would know from the level of the music if you should be there or not for long.
It's so funny.
But if I had gone home and went onto the back of the apartment block, there was like a stairwell, and you could look out over to where that thing would have been, and I was too scared to do it. Not that it would have still been there, but just I could have, and I didn't.
Do you now? Has anyone ever? I'm sure people have asked you this before, and Tom, I'll let you get some questions in as well.
Sure.
Do you think it was there? You seem to have taken on a life because of, at least partly because of this sighting. You think there's even a remote possibility with all the work that you've done in the field now that it could have been there for you specifically?
God, the ego it would take for me to say yes, I think so. But I've asked other people that same question about different things. I don't think it's unfair. I don't think I could say yes, that was there for me, because that's just too egotistical. But in the same way, I've asked like Randall Nickerson, who made the Aerial Phenomenon documentary, and I made the point to him that did that event happen 30 or 40 years ago, not for it to have the impact then, but for people like him to come along now and make a documentary that is seen by tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, which has an influence now because of a time. And yeah, maybe I've often wondered, could people who were next to that object even see it? Did they know it was there? Or was it just at the distance we were at, and because of the time, whatever it was, conditions, we could see it, and maybe other people didn't? And it's purely hypothetical speculation, because you'll never know now. People often ask me if I talk about it, what did you do? Did you report it? And like, well, no. Can you imagine going home and like phoning 999 here in the UK and being like, hi, I want to report a UFO sighting? They would have hung up on you.
Yeah.
So there was no one to report it to. There was no forums, there was no
Again,
Twitter to jump on. So
again, no internet to
Nah.
file a digital report with MUFON
yeah, there would have
privately.
been. I guess there would have been an internet, 90, 96, 97, but nothing looking like what it would
Yeah, okay.
even a couple of years later.
No search engines, nothing. That was back. I mean, because I'm turning 30 on tomorrow, actually. I do remember the world, pre-modern internet. So even before dial-up, right?
Mhm.
So even before then, I remember it. So my first cell phone was a Nokia brick.
Nice.
All it had was Snake on it, and that was the only game. So, I mean, I do. It sucks though. It sucks. I wonder how many situations like yours happened before mass reporting was available, like widespread reporting was available. So it's just a thing to ponder.
I still think now 95% of sightings aren't reported, even by the general public. How many people do you speak to that don't have a UFO interest? Just colleagues that you work with, or people you get chatting to on a night out or something, or a friend of a friend, and you mention UFOs, and they'll tell you, do you know what? I saw a UFO once. Oh, did you? And they tell you. They never report it. I think most people have seen something, but I don't think most get reported anyway.
Yeah, and I've often wondered if it's just people like your mother. That sounded like a bad joke, but I'm literally,
really
I'm
offensive.
literally, yeah, I'm really mean, like your mom's reaction, where she's like, move on, or if it's partly fear of if I report it, then it's a reality.
Yeah.
Right.
Bit of both. Yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think it's probably the same thing, and maybe there was a bit of fear of the unknown. There probably is, definitely, for my mum. Like she says it's not, but I would imagine. Do you want me to phone her and ask?
Yes.
live
you know what's so funny is my co-host has a site, like one of the craziest, it's a co-host of mine, a guy who, not Tom right here, but he had one of the most amazing sightings I've ever heard. And him and his mother, and he called his mom on the podcast without any prior knowledge. She confirmed all of it, and like that's how he proved it to me. He was like, "Wait a second, I'll call it," and called her, and she was like, all he said was, "Describe our UFO sighting," and she literally tit for tat just what he just told me, and she couldn't have known he was going to call. So it was just like, okay, like that was really cool. So yeah, I've had that
hell
happen
of a
before.
story.
Yeah, I've had that happen before.
I don't think you want another Scottish accent on this podcast. So I've sent her a WhatsApp message to ask her, just remember that UFO years ago, were you scared? I'll see what she says. I'll let you know.
All right. Yeah. So you go on, life goes on at that point. You're only 11 years old. So life goes on, and then ...
Yeah, and then 25 years pass. God, it would have been a little bit less than that. But December 2019, I was driving home from work, and I live near an airport, so cards on the table, I'm very aware, aircraft are in the air round about where I stay, and I was very, very close to the airport where I was driving. So at this point, I've moved from Scotland, and I now live in the northeast of England, just outside of Newcastle. And driving home, again, cold winter's night, it's the classic setting, isn't it? It was like about 6 o'clock in the evening. And I take a kind of back country road home, which lets you avoid all the busy traffic on the major kind of motorways and expressways. But a lot of people take this back road because it's just quicker. You drive, it goes a bit longer, but you keep moving, and I prefer that. So coming round the bend, there's like a minute, not even a minute's worth of road. And as you're driving along it, you can see some trees, like the overhang of a trees, and I take a right turn. But as I'm driving along, I can see these 2 points of light, and I immediately thought, plane, because I'm next to the airport. It's literally over my shoulder. And as I'm going closer, they still hadn't moved. And I get, as you're driving and an aircraft's moving, you can't always tell if it's, it looks like it's hanging in the air, but it's not. It's just the way you're going. So I get that. And then I get closer still, and I realize that's actually really low down, like really low. Even though it was a dark night, there was no cloud or anything. And then as I get almost underneath it, there's a white van has pulled over to the side of this kind of busy road, and the guy's hanging out his van looking up. So as I pass underneath the plane, well, I think it's a plane, you can make out against the night sky the 2 points of light, but it's kind of black triangular shape. And I was like, that's not a plane. You know, at that height, you see flashing, you're next to an airport, different, you know, light patterns will be flashing and stuff, and there had been nothing. And I can't make out any underneath, can't make out any windows. At that height, you would have saw windows and lights and all that kind of stuff. And I realised that, God, that's just a triangle. That's just sitting there, and I can see this guy just hanging out his window. So I missed my turn off. The first thing I done was phone my wife. It's a fast road, so I can't exactly pull my phone and start filming.
Right.
Even if I had filmed it, I would have been filming a
Through
tiny, through a window,
through a
tiny
glass
point of light.
window of something that's super far and blends in with the night sky.
You would have seen more of my reflection than anything on camera. So I managed to turn into this little farmhouse. It's just literally just a few 100 meters along the road. I turned in, and I'm still kind of commenting to my wife, commentating, going, "Oh my God, there's this triangle. It's still there. It's just sitting in the sky. It's not moved. If it was moving, it should at this point been much further away than it was. I could tell it was maybe 150 feet, 200 feet in the air at most, because I know how high those trees are. I still need to, and I keep saying one day I'm going to. It's only a couple of minutes from where I live. I'm going to film the so people can see where it was. And so the old couple came out the house. And I was like, "I'm really sorry, I've literally drove into your house to turn around here." And the guy was, "Oh, that's okay. We're just checking things are all right." And I said, there's just something along the road hovering above the trees. And I just always remember the old guy kind of looked along, and he just went, "Oh, yeah, it just shows you there's something else out there, doesn't it?" Anyway, good night. And he went back in his house.
We got to find that guy.
I mean, I could go knock on his door and he'd be like, "Oh, you again?" And I just
is it there?
Yeah. I remember turning round, and as I turned round, I could see it starting to move off over the tops of the trees, but it was moving off like diagonally to the side. It wasn't going straight on.
No noise,
Nah, nothing. I mean, my windows were up and, you know, that kind of stuff. But I got the sense there was no noise. There was no engine, you know, that kind of stuff. It moved off. I could just tell the way it was going kind of diagonally to the side. It was an odd angle of movement. So I drove back along and tried to go round and see where it would be, because at the point I would have turned the corner. It's an expansive open field, because then you're over to the airport, you know, a kind of mile away, and there was nothing. I would never have seen it in the first place against the night sky had those 2 points of light not been there. If those lights weren't on, I would never have seen it, because the black sky was so dark. I would never have seen that sitting. When it moved away, I've always said, another light came on the front, flashing really, really sporadically, but it wasn't like it didn't seem to be a consistent pattern. I'll never 100% nail my colours to the mast, because, you know, memory and going back, but it didn't seem like it was going like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
No pattern.
It was like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2. It was a really strange pattern. The other two lights were solid. The front one wasn't. And I interviewed David Marler. He's like generally considered the
triangle
world's the expert in black triangles in the world. And he said he'd never heard of a report with that two lights solid, one light on the front, sporadically like that. So yeah, it was interesting. I remember, and long story short, I got home. Again, my wife, I was really excited about it. I was like, I saw this UFO and really interesting. And I repeated it all back to her, and she just kind of stood kind of smiling. And I remember her saying, like, I wish you like were this excited about your job. You know, I wish you had this much interest in other things in life as the UFOs. And I think that kind of planted the seed for, I'd love to podcast about UFOs. And I listened to like Open Minds and Somewhere in the Skies and stuff like that. And it was at that point I was like, I'd love to do a UFO podcast. But